Okay, the fly I want to tie today is the Stoat Tail. It's a very well-known Scottish salmon fly, very good in our area for sea trout. I think it's good in lots of areas for sea trout, predominantly a black fly. So this is what I want to tie today. Okay, before we start, I wax the silk. This is important. The friction going through the wax heats it up a bit and melts the wax into the silk. Not only does it make it durable, but it makes it a little bit easier to control, and it helps it to grip the shank of the hook. With all start of all flies, the way I start anyway, just behind the eye, 3 winds forward, 1, 2, 3, and 3 winds back, same rotation over the silks you've just done. That really gives you a fairly secure start. I'll now take the silk down towards the bend of the hook. Now, a lot of flies benefit from a sort of foundation of silk, but it doesn't matter too much with this fly because I'm going to put a wool body on it. I'm just going to cut off this silk, this loose piece. When you do this, if you hold it tight and cut close to the shank like this, you'll find the little bit tucks back behind because you had it under tension and it springs back. Okay, I'm going to take this down towards the bend in fairly open turns, just because we don't need to worry about the foundation. If we were doing a dry fly, that's far enough. Hang about there. If it was a dry fly, we'd need a good foundation. Pardon me. Now this fly has a tag, what's called a tag. And for the tag, I will use flat tinsel like this. This is Mylar, Uni Mylar, and it's a sort of medium. Okay, I'll cut a bit off. Now this has got gold one side and silver the other side. Whenever you tie in this flat mylar, this flat tinsel, have the wrong side towards you, because when you start to wind it on, it turns over and you get the correct side showing. I've wound that on and I'm going to put a little bit of a sort of foundation in touch and turns to take it down to about where the tag should be. And it's about there. And I'll bring this back up, ready to tie it off when we get there. Now before I wind on the tag, I'll put a little bit of varnish just where it's going to be wound. It'll help to stick it down. The varnish I use is Sally Hansen Hard as Nails, but there's I don't only use that, there's other varnishes I use. I like as well the Low Flash Fly Time varnish. Okay, I'm now going to wind the tag just like this, sort of overlapping turns. Now the tag gives a bit of flash to the fly. A lot of salmon flies have it, and so do sea trout flies. It sort of gives a bit of a target for the fish, so I'm told. I've overlapped several times and that's okay, and I'll just tie it off like that. I'll remove it. I use my cheap scissors for this. If I cut tinsel or anything like that, I don't use my best scissors. I keep these for feather and silk and herl, etc. Okay, that's the tag. Now, the next item is the tail of the fly. And the tail comes from a lovely pheasant, from the golden pheasant crest. The golden pheasant gives us some nice feathers. It gives us the tippet, which is an orange, black barred one. And this is the crest. It's a lovely yellow, makes a fine tail. It can twist a bit when you put it on, so you need a bit of care with it. That's about the measurement, and I'll see if I can secure it. Okay. Now, because they twist a bit, we can position them if we have to. That's not very far out there. Maybe a fraction long, so I'll draw it through a little bit. That'll do, I'm sure. And I secure that like that. And that's our tail. Now the tail is on. I'm now going to put the rib. The ribbon is, it's an oval silver. I could rib with a flat, but the pattern calls for this oval, which is pretty good, and I'm going to use that. So, cut off the amount I think I'm going to need. Again with my cheap scissors so that I don't blunt my best ones. And I tie in the rib. I tie in the rib good length to secure it. That's about there. And I'll now take the silk up towards the eye of the hook. It's a little bit long there, so I'll just remove those. And I'll tie in like this. Tying everything down and tidying up. Just like that. Now that that's down like that, I go back down to the bend in preparation to tying in the body. The body for this fly is wool. Well, I use wool. Ordinary knitting wool. You can tie thousands of flies with a ball of wool. And you can get it in various colours for various flies. It's surprising it's used quite a bit for salmon flies. So I'll just cut off a short length and show you what I do with it. Cut off a piece like that. I'll tease out one of the strands, just like this. It's coming okay. I'll use one of the strands, because we don't need more than one. And I'll tie that in again, about the length of the hook, length of the shank on the side. Draw that a little bit to get it about right. So that's now tied in, and I take the silk back up towards the eye. A little bit long, I don't need to go any further with that, so I'll just snip that off and bind this all down. Now what we've got is the tag, we've got the tail, we've got the rib, and we've got the body. I'm going to wind the body. You can, if you want to, put some varnish on. It's not really necessary, but you know, I will do it. And I just put it this side of the shank because you don't want very much. Just that side of the shank. It'll help the body to stick down. Okay, I'm just going to wind it. It sort of goes in touching turns, like that. It makes a nice body. The true pattern, if you looked it up in the fly tying book of patterns, would tell you to use floss, silk floss. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's very good, makes a lovely body. But I like wool, Not just because it's cheap, but it absorbs water, is durable, and it's a pretty good material all round. I think makes a quite attractive body as well. I'll just secure it with 2 turns. I'll nip off this surplus. Give it another couple of turns. That's the body on. I'm now going to rib it. When you rib any fly, generally you will counter wind. In other words, the opposite way to the way you wound the body. But with this fly, this body is quite firm. It doesn't matter. So I will just wind the normal way. I'll try to get my turns even. It makes it look a bit more attractive. Just like that. As you can see. And I'll secure that with a couple of winds. I'll remove this little bit of surplus. So now you can see that makes quite an attractive body. The next item to apply, this isn't a complicated fly, it's quite straightforward. The next item to apply is the hackle, and I'm going to put on a throat hackle. Now, hackles are, they form a big part of a fly tier's collection of materials, and they're applied in different ways. If it was a dry fly, it would have a shoulder hackle or a collar hackle. It's the same thing. It's wound around like that on a dry fly. I'll show you. I've got a dry fly here. That's a dry fly, and that's how the shoulder hackle would go on. But in this case, this is a wet fly, and we're going to do what's called a throat hackle. Some people call it different, but I call it a throat hackle, and it just comes down underneath. I use a hen hackle, a hen feather from the cape of a hen, domestic hen. This is a black one that's been dyed. It's been dyed black. You can see the hen hackle's a bit webby, as opposed to a cock hackle, which has got more sparkle and more room in the hackles. I don't know if you can see the difference. You can use either on this fly. I like to use a hen hackle because it's more inclined to absorb water than this type of hackle. And this is a wet fly, so it's a good thing to have it absorb water. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the number of hackles that I think we're going to need for the beard. And it's about there. Do you see I drew them down a bit to get the ends sort of level? Now I'll pinch them like that and take them off. And that should be enough for our beard hackle. So you'll see where it goes. It goes down like this underneath, and I'm going to use what is called the pinch and loop method. Squeeze my finger and thumb together, bring the silk up between my thumb, down, forming a loose loop, and then down the other side of the hook shank, and bring the silk up and around like that. When we do that, that way the loop forms stops the material being pushed around. Okay, now I've got a little bit of waste there that I will remove. You can put a touch of varnish under there if you wish to secure it, but we've got quite a few more windings to go on of silk, which all help to hold it. Right, the next item I'm going to apply is the wing. And this fly is called a stoat tail because the wing is made from a stoat tail. To be honest, I don't have a stoat tail here. I've got this is a mink tail. It's not quite black, it's brown, dark brown. It's a job to get hold of a mink tail these days, And it's only the tip, if you got one, that it's only the tip that's black anyway. And I know a guy who nearly got himself killed scraping one up off the road down by Merthyr Mawr. One had been killed, and he wanted to use the tail for his Stoat Tail flies. So what we do, we sort of measure up what we want. It's about there, and we'll cut this off. This is the tail. This is off the tail, and we're going to use it as our wing like this. Now, with all fur, whether it's body fur or tails, you get an underfur. And this should be removed, because if you don't remove it, it'll give you a very bulky head on the fly. It does no good anyway. So I draw it out like that. Can you see it coming out? This is just no good at all on the wing. We don't want it, so we've got to remove it. And it comes out of this wing, out of this tail, this material quite easily like that. If you know anyone who traps mink, they're a bit smelly, but you can get the tail cured properly. It's not a bad material to have. Now, the length of the wing usually comes to the end of the tail, so it's about there. Now I'm going to tie this in with a few turns to secure it. Pinch and loop method again. Its hair can be a bit slippery. Squirrel tail is about the worst, but you can sort of position it a bit like that and give it a few winds to secure it. That looks pretty good. That's about the right measurement. And now we've got to remove this bit of surplus in the front here. Sometimes when you cut this, you can distort the wing a bit, but if you do it carefully and with a nice sharp scissors, you should be okay. Now, you can see the fly, all the materials have been added. Incidentally, there's plenty of mink around. The more we kill, the better. Okay, now you can see the roots of the tail are exposed there, and here I always, on a hair wing, apply a blob of varnish to the roots. It's been held at the moment by the windings that I've put on, the silk windings. Now, while it's like that, I'm going to secure it even more, and I'm going to form the head. These windings will really push the varnish down into the roots to really secure the wing. And the last job on this fly is to finish it off with either a whip finish or half hitches. I like to do a whip finish. I'll do that now. This is the way I do it. I recommend a whip finish tool. I just put over the hook like the silk like that. I get this one which remains under tension all the time, and I simply wind it around 3, 4, 5 times, depending on the fly. If it's a big fly, a salmon fly, or a sea trout fly, I give it 4 or 5 winds. If it's a dry fly, 3 is enough. Then put the needle, your dubbing needle, in the loop to draw it up. If you don't do that, it'll just go into a horrible old knot, and you draw it out last minute. Now that is the whip finish by hand. But I do recommend you buy a whip finish tool. As I say, I don't use it because I was self-taught and I learned to do that out of a book. It wasn't easy, but the whip finish tool makes the job easier. But I will demonstrate briefly on this fly only the half hitch. The half hitch, you form a loop, keeping a bit of tension. You just form a loop like this turn it over, put it over the eye and draw it up like that. It does help if you touch the head first when you do the half hitch with a bit of varnish, because you're drawing it up then onto tacky varnish. That's 1, 2. You need at least 3 if you're doing a half hitch, because the half hitch, 1 is not quite secure enough. That's it. Now, the only item left is to varnish the head. But first of all, I've got to cut the silk. The way to cut the silk doesn't matter too much on this fly, but on a dry fly it's important. Open your scissors to a gape, put it each side of the silk and gently push like that. That way you won't remove any of the hackles. That on a dry fly, that's important because the hackles are pushed out, and the hackles that you don't want to cut simply move aside as the scissors slides up. Okay, that fly is finished. Apart from varnishing the head, you can apply varnish with your dubbing needle, or what I prefer to do with Sally Hansen's. It's got a little brush in it, and I've tapered the brush to make things a bit easier. Simply paint the head a bit like this. This is called hard as nails, and it is as hard as nails. When it gets dry, you can give it a second coating if you want to after a few hours. I always then finally ensure the eye is clear. There's no problem on this fly, but with a dry fly sometimes it's important. If this was a dry fly, it's very important. The eye is smaller. You can use an old hackle and just pull it through like that. That is a Stoat Tail fly. I recommend it. It's a good fly for our rivers. Some tie it with a red hackle or an orange hackle. The orange hackle is then called a Stinchar stoat. The Stinchar is a river in southern Scotland, in Ayrshire, an area I know quite well. And then they prefer the orange hackle. But this is the original true tie-in which I wanted to show you. I recommend the fly, and I thank you for watching.